Yeah, I'm so sorry for that interruption. Welcome back to yet another live webinar with me, Dr. Avinash. Today's topic is going to be deep vein thrombosis. And thank you for being here on time. So what we are doing today is actually we are going live not only on our Zoom platform, but we had quite a lot of registration for people who were not from India. And as a result, we are going live simultaneously on YouTube also. And everybody of you is going to get a recap of this particular video because you're going to be given a link to my YouTube channel. So let's start with today's topic, deep vein thrombosis. Stuff that you should definitely know before you start with deep vein thrombosis is the fact that it's a thrombosis of the deeper veins. Literally means that inside our legs, our lower limbs, are two set of veins. One is a superficial venous system. The other is, of course, the deep venous system. The superficial venous system has the tendency to form varicosities. The deep vein, as you will study with me today, has a tendency to form clots. And these clots cause deep vein thrombosis, also known as phlebothrombosis. And the reason was given by Rudolf Virchow. Now, I don't know if you remember this, but Rudolf Virchow gave us a triad. And he said that whenever there is clotting, whenever there is abnormal clotting, three main factors play a very important role. The first factor is stasis of blood. Any reason because of which the blood flow becomes sluggish, the blood flow stops. That tends to cause thrombosis. The second reason which Rudolf Virchow gave was the fact that clots also happen when there is endothelial injury. The inner lining of our blood vessel is also known as endothelium, and the endothelium is antithrombotic. So most of our blood vessels, because they have nice, beautiful endothelium, they don't allow blood clots to form that easily. But when the endothelium is damaged, it exposes the subendothelial connective tissue. And that subendothelial connective tissue is pro-clotting. So any endothelial injury will cause clots to happen. And the third reason given by Rudolf Virchow was the fact that our blood has two types of opposing components. The first set of components, we call them the clotting factors, they are responsible for clot formation. The second type of blood component are anti-clotting. Any reason because of which the pro-clotting factors increase or the anti-clotting factors decrease, that leads to hypercoagulability, and that will lead to thrombosis. So if you keep these 3 points in your mind, understanding why somebody would get deep vein thrombosis is very simple. Well, deep vein thrombosis will happen when one of the three things happen: hypercoagulability, stasis of blood, or endothelial injury. So when can we expect a stasis of blood? Stasis of blood is very common in post-operative patients who are bedridden. The bigger the surgery, the more longer the patient becomes bedridden. So imagine somebody having a hip surgery or a knee surgery where the chances of the patient becoming mobile are less. Here the chances of deep vein thrombosis will be very, very high. Think of a patient who is a patient of stroke or paraplegia. He has hemiplegia. He has spinal cord disorders because of which he is unable to move. Maybe he has a chronic disease which now has become so fulminant that he's unable to move. He's completely bedridden. All these conditions are going to cause stasis of blood. Stasis of blood also used to happen in long distance, travelers. This was once upon a time a big issue. People who used to fly on intercontinental air planes, those airplanes were pretty crowded, very little leg space. Not like the intercontinental flights that we have nowadays. The international flights nowadays have pretty good room, leg space. The initial planes did not have that. And as a result, many people used to sit in a very awkward position. And because they used to sit in that awkward position, getting up, like even to go to the washroom was very difficult. So when people sit in a particular position for 7 hours, clotting becomes a possibility. That was known as traveler's thrombosis. Pregnancy can be another reason for thrombosis, because the uterus might press upon the vena cava or the pelvic veins, which of course blocks the blood flow from the legs, and that causes stasis, and that might lead to um, deep vein thrombosis. Or it can be trauma, endothelium injury might be a cause. Cancers, by certain unknown mechanism, tends to increase the coagulability of the blood. And nowadays we have noticed a beautiful new thing happening called as e-thrombosis. E-thrombosis is classically seen in people who work on computers for a long period of time without actually getting up from their chair or going for a walk. And these people tend to suffer from deep vein thrombosis very frequently. Other reasons would include people who have too many platelets or very viscous blood, polycythemia or thrombocytosis, or the clotting factors, the anti-clotting factors are deficient. And when the anti-clotting factors are deficient, automatically the coagulation becomes a possibility, right? Patient does not come to your clinic saying, I have a deep vein thrombosis. He says, I'm having fever. This is probably the earliest sign or earliest symptom of deep vein thrombosis. He tells you that there's a pain and swelling in the leg region. And when you notice, there is, of course, an obvious tense swelling. It seems to be edematous. When you try to touch it, it's painful to the patient. We call it tenderness. See, the arterial flow is not obstructed. It's the venous return which is a problem. So arterial blood can still come inside the leg. And as the blood comes in, the leg is slightly more warmer. Now, well, this is not compulsory. Sometimes you get extreme pallor. Sometimes you get extreme cyanosis. When there's extreme pallor, you give it a nice fancy name. We call it phlegmasia alba dolens. Alba is white. And when it is bluish in color, we call it phlegmasia cerulea dolens. Cerulea refers to the bluish color. The skin becomes shiny and stretched, very characteristic of deep vein thrombosis. See, but as good doctors, you just can't take things at face value. You need to be able to find out what's wrong with your patient by performing certain clinical tests. The investigations are something that we will do, but some clinical tests are extremely, extremely important. And these clinical tests, I want you to understand so that when you do it on your patient, you get a good, correct diagnosis. The first special clinical test that you need to perform is called as the Homan's sign. The Homan's sign is a very simple test. You make the patient lie down on the bed and you take his leg. So if this is the leg of the patient, what you basically do is push on the leg in such a manner that the foot becomes dorsiflexed. Now, as you dorsiflex the foot, the muscle, the calf muscle gets stretched. And the deep veins are actually within the calf muscle. So as you stretch the calf muscles, the calf muscle pains. This is a good enough sign to confirm that there is something wrong with the deep veins. But the second sign that I want to discuss with you, it's called as the Moses sign. This is an older sign. We really don't tend to do it nowadays because there is a risk of we breaking the clot. And when we break the clot, chances are there will be thromboembolism. The clot might flow up the venous system, reach the heart, and from there go into the lungs, causing pulmonary embolism. So Moses test has to be done a little carefully. Now, this is how you do Moses test. You catch hold of the calf muscle and you give it a nice squeeze. Now, as you squeeze the calf muscle, the patient complains of pain. And that confirms the fact that there is a clot inside this calf muscle. Of course, it will be unilateral, right? It's very difficult to have deep vein thrombosis in both the legs at the same time. It is possible, but difficult. So whichever leg has the pain has deep vein thrombosis. The third test is called as Neuhoff sign. Now this is extra. You need to know this. Neuhoff sign is a very simple sign. What you do is you do deep palpation of the calf muscle. Now, as you do deep palpation, you feel that the calf muscle has become thickened and it's tender. So this thickening and tenderness of the calf muscle gives you an idea that there might be a clot inside. See, everything is a might be. We are using a combination of tests to find out whether there is really a clot or not. Well, a fantastic test is a test called as Linton's test. Now, what exactly is a Linton's test? This is what we do. We make the person lie down on the bed and we tie a tourniquet at the saphenofemoral junction. So what I'm trying to say here is, if this is the leg of the person, okay, a very poorly drawn leg, but what you have to do is tie a tourniquet at the saphenofemoral junction. He's still lying down, right? So when you lie down, you make the patient lie down, you're technically emptying all the veins. That's what we are doing. Now you tie the tourniquet, you make the patient stand up and ask him to go for a brisk walk. Ask him to walk a few steps in your clinic, brisk walking. The brisk walking will cause more blood to enter into the exercising muscle, but the tourniquet will not allow that blood to exit the legs. The brisk walking will bring in more blood, but the tourniquet will not allow that blood to go back. Now, if that really happens, really happens, then the superficial veins will become dilated. So you will see dilated superficial veins, but we want to be 100% sure. So what we do, we do not remove the tourniquet of the patient. We make him lie down again on the bed and we raise his leg. Now, as you raise the leg of the patient, what you're expecting is the gravity will pull back all the blood if the deep veins are patent. But if the patient has thrombosis in the deep veins, then blood flow through the deep vein is not at all a possibility. And if you rule out the possibility of deep vein taking the blood back, even after the patient is horizontal and you have lifted his leg at a slight angle, the superficial veins will still remain filled. This literally confirms, clinically at least, the diagnosis of deep vein thrombosis. Now, when you're doing this, please keep in mind that there is a good risk of pulmonary thromboembolism in all patients of DVT. So please keep out a watch for signs of pulmonary embolism, which includes breathlessness. A sudden onset of breathlessness is very classical, pain in the chest region, or it can even be hemoptysis, cough blood. So you can ask for this signs from the patient. So this will kind of confirm if there is pulmonary embolism or not. Now, before I go further, I want to be absolutely sure whether every one of you has understood whatever clinical signs I have explained. If you have got it, please give me a IGI, I got it, in the chat box so I know I can proceed further. And if you have doubts, please let me know. Thank you, Madhvi. Thank you, Siddhant. Thank you, Sangeeta, Radhika. Fantastic. Vishan, very nice. Snehal has given me a tick. Deepika, very nice. Fantastic. Amazing. To all the people who are giving me a tick and thumbs up and an IGI. Thank you so much for confirming that you have understood this, which means I can definitely go ahead and explain to you the various investigations that you're going to do. See, the idea is to try to find out whether the clot inside the deep veins or not. The best way to see a clot in today's world would be Doppler. Doppler with a duplex scanning. A Doppler with a duplex scanning can tell you exactly where and how big the clot is. It can even tell you whether the clot is partially obstructing the blood flow or completely obstructing the blood flow. So it makes it easier for us to understand the degree of obstruction by using a venous Doppler or a duplex scanning. But duplex scan and Dopplers are something that are much recent investigations. Before the invention of Dopplers, doctors used to recommend venogram, where a radio opaque dye used to be injected into the leg veins. And we used to take a radiograph, an X-ray film was generated. And we used to check for any defects, filling defects. But with the advent of venous Doppler, we really don't want to risk giving somebody that radio opaque dye, because these dyes are known to cause reactions inside the body, sometimes as severe as anaphylaxis or even renal failure. So we kind of don't want that kind of reactions to happen. So venograms are kind of not done nowadays. Doppler serves the purpose. Anything else that we can do? Yes. If there is a clot, the body will attempt to break that clot. It's a natural phenomena. Whenever there is too much of clotting inside the body activates plasmin. We have a protein called as tissue thromboplastin activator. Okay, sorry, the tissue plasminogen activator, the TPA. And the tissue plasminogen activator present in our body gets activated to break any excess clot. And when the clot is broken down by plasmin, when plasmin breaks down the clot, the number of degradation products of that fibrin clot, FDP, fibrin degradation products, increase. It's an indirect marker that there was a clot and it is being broken down by the patient's body. Another substance that we can check in the blood of the patient is called as D-dimer. So D-dimers and FDPs, if they are high, they may point towards a clot. Now, where that clot is will vary. If you have clot anywhere in the body, there will be high levels of FDP and D-dimer. Your job as a doctor would be to correlate clinically, whether it really makes sense that the patient has signs and symptoms of deep vein thrombosis and there is D-dimer positive. D-dimer test negative makes more sense. If the D-dimer test is negative, you can be 100% sure there is no thrombus in the body. A positive is like, maybe it might be in the leg, it can be somewhere else. So you have to take this test with a pinch of salt. You need to be able to understand where is the clot. Apart from this, if you're thinking that your patient has pulmonary embolism, you should do a ventilation perfusion ratio, VA by Q. And in cases where there is pulmonary embolism, you will get a VA by Q mismatch. The ventilation would be proper. The perfusion of the lungs will not be that perfect. Okay. The amount of air he is taking in will be normal, but the amount of blood going into the lungs will be abnormal because there is a clot inside the lungs. So that might be one way of approaching this pulmonary embolism phenomena. You can even do a CT scan, a pulmonary artery CT scan, or a pulmonary angiography to find out if there is really any problem inside the lungs or not. But then these tests have to be done when you think they are needed. Just because a patient is bedridden does not mean he has DVT. He needs to have the signs and symptoms. If the patient is bedridden and he has signs and symptoms, you need not do VA by Q mismatch test or pulmonary artery CT scan because he might not really have pulmonary embolism. So choose your tests wisely. Now, before I go to the management part, I want you to understand that these free webinars are a gateway to something better. Quite a few of you have been taking the opportunity and joining me for other courses. Today, I'm introducing to you my next course. The next biggest pandemic to happen is going to be diabetes mellitus. The kind of stressful lifestyle people are having, the kind of pathetic diet people take, the kind of stresses people have. And thanks to this COVID-19, things are going to become even more messier. All this in the next 1, 2 years, 3 years is going to convert into quite a lot of patients becoming frank diabetes. Many of them are in latent diabetes at this point of time. And it has been suggested that by the end of 2020, 10% of your patients, people visiting a doctor's clinic, 10% of them will be diabetic. And as a good clinician, as a good medical student, as a good doctor, if you do not know the latest classification, what you have been reading probably is an old classification, the latest classification given by WHO on diabetes mellitus, the different types of diabetes, the type 1, the type 2, the other subcategories, how do you approach each and every one of these patients, what kind of drugs you should give, what are the expected adverse effects. If you don't know this, then you will miss out a lot in your clinical practice. So this is a course that everybody who wants to be a good clinician should join. The actual course fee is 800, but because you people are attending this particular webinar, I will give you how to join this particular course at 50% discount at the end of this particular webinar. So all of you who really, really want to be perfect clinically, think about joining this course. It will be on Monday and Tuesday, 9 o'clock to 10 o'clock. Plus, people who have joined my ECG sessions already know that you will get some preparatory videos so that you can be in touch with the topic before I actually teach you this particular topic. Okay, so more about diabetes mellitus, the upcoming course later on. Right now, I want you to understand, if you know that there are 3 main reasons of deep vein thrombosis, and one of them is stasis of blood, and you know that there are certain conditions in which stasis is going to happen, why don't prevent it? No? Why don't you prevent it by using some basic standard logical, reasoning? Why is there stasis of blood? Because the patient is lying on the bed. Then why is there no circulation happening? Because the patient is lying on the bed. The gravity is not aiding the blood flow properly. Raise the legs a little bit. Put in 2-3 pillows below his leg. That will automatically drain the leg veins. The chances of DVT will decrease drastically just by this small thing. And it's not like you need to keep the pillows below the leg for the entire day. It's like every 3-4 hours, for 5 minutes also, if somebody raises the legs, that's a good thing to do. That will definitely reduce the edema, reduce the pain. It will not allow the clot to form. Other things that you can do apart from leg elevation is massage, pressure bandage. That can be done. Tell the patient it's necessary that he is not bedridden. Now, of course, a patient who is having stroke, paraplegia, you can't expect him to get up and walk. But patients who have undergone hip replacement or a knee replacement, you have to tell them that you really don't need that prolonged rest. The earlier you move, even if it is with the help of, crutches or with a walker, make him or her walk. Physiotherapy will help. The more movements happen, the better the circulation will become. Another thing that you can try is maintain hydration of the patient. So this is a good enough option. Maintain hydration. This can be managed. Like, you have to account for this before the patient goes into the surgery. But then there are some who really can't move. We have already taken the example of chronically ill patients or people who are, bedridden. In these cases, you can try low molecular weight heparin. Ask him not to smoke, not to drink, not to drink alcohol, no oral contraceptive pills for people who are prone to getting deep vein thrombosis. So females should avoid taking OC pills. Low molecular weight heparin is amazing. It's actually a natural product of our body. Like, we have heparin, LMW heparin is a smaller form of heparin. It's good. It's even safe in pregnancy. It's much better than warfarin. So you can try these things and prevent things from happening. Unfortunately, what happens is quite a lot of patients will not follow your instructions. And it's impossible for you and me as doctors to be behind our patients all the time. We really can't be focused on them. You have to tell them it's their job to do it. And sometimes they fail to follow your orders properly. They end up getting deep vein thrombosis. Now they come back to you. You have to treat an issue that they have created. Here, you start back with something really, really basic. See, a good doctor is the one who avoids medicine. Try to avoid medicine as much as possible. Now, in this particular case, you really can't avoid medicine altogether, but you can try a good rest, limb elevation, bandage. A crepe bandage will put enough pressure on the leg that there will be no stasis, like the blood comes in and goes back. There will be no stasis. So it's a good strategy to use. Get a 2D Doppler, a Doppler done. When you're doing a Doppler, you get an idea whether the clot is fixed or moving. A fixed clot can dissolve on its own. Less risk of embolism. Allow the body to take care of it. Why do you want to interfere in a natural process? Let the body take care. You just see to it that the clot does not grow. Now, how will you assure the patient that the clot is not growing? Simple, you give him anticoagulants. These heparin, LMW heparins or warfarins, they help in stopping the growth of a clot. That can be done. So you start with LMW heparin and you shift him gradually to warfarin. Simple. If the clot is free, then there is a huge risk. Because a free clot, a clot that is not fixed, can easily embolize. And when it embolizes, there will be too many complications. So you are going to try and destroy that clot by using drugs such as streptokinase, urokinase, alteplase. These drugs literally will melt the clot. Or you can just remove the clot by using this Fogarty venous balloon catheter. Now, sometimes the clots are too big to be removed by these Fogarty catheters. In such a scenario, what you have to do is you may give it a try, but if the risk of thromboembolism is too high, according to you, please think about intracaval filters. Now, these intracaval filters look something like this. Quite a lot of these intracaval filters are available. They are supposed to be placed inside the inferior vena cava. As you can see here, the Kimray Greenfield filter can be seen very clearly. This is actually inside the vena cava. This is the vena cava like this. So any clot that gets dislodged from the leg veins, it cannot cross this filter. It gets stuck here and then it breaks into smaller pieces, and the smaller pieces will flow. The lung can take care of small thrombus. It's the job of lung. It will take care of these small clots. It's the big clot we were worried about. And by putting in a filter, you have effectively reduced the risk that these people have for pulmonary embolism. This can be tried. Well, there are other more complicated surgeries available, which includes surgery like Palma's operation, where it's more like a bypass surgery. So when a person has a femoral vein, a clot in the femoral vein, you can use the same sided great saphenous vein and create a bypass tract, as you can see here. So a bypass tract is created. So all the blood from here will go through the bypass tract like this. And the problem is solved. Now, sometimes the clot is bigger. Now, when the clot is bigger, you may have to do a much more complicated procedure. Now, imagine occlusion is in the iliac veins. So if the occlusion is in the iliac vein, we can use the graft of the great saphenous vein from the opposite side. So this will be a very complicated procedure. This is called as the May-Husny surgery or the May-Husny operations. So in this particular way, you need to think about deep vein thrombosis. You need to plan your investigation and management in such a manner that one, the deep vein thrombosis does not really happen, and two, if it happens, you manage most of the things non-operatively, but then we have surgeries available. If anybody has any doubts with whatever I have been teaching you, please put it in the chat box. I will be more than happy to help you. For people who wish to join me for the upcoming next pandemic, that is diabetes mellitus webinar on Monday and Tuesday, 9 p.m.